Friends, what we have here is not a history lesson, not a story of Paul, not a first century tale, but an extremely powerful example of what can happen for all of us. Let me begin with the fact, with the resonance of that poetic expression, sing a new song. You know, that's a metaphor. It's more than to sing a new song, which sounds positive and lovely. It's to become a new person. That's what it is, to sing a new song. It is a powerful wisdom teaching that calls on us to not be what we once were and become what God calls us to be. That's singing a new song. You can sing a new song anywhere. Whenever you turn impatient or angry or any other dark and godless way, remember those words. Sing a new song. Turn it into a positive. Let it be an alarm clock reminding you you are called now in this lifetime to sing a new song. And boy, does the world need people who can sing that song. There is so much misery and darkness, ugliness, pettiness, mean-spiritedness, all those ungodly things, which are referred to in this ancient psalm when it is said, all the gods of the peoples are idols. Now, we don't have to worship a stone or a piece of bronze to have idols. We can make of our own ego an idol. We can make of our own opinion an idol. We are called here in no uncertain terms to sing a new song and to not be what we once were. And so here through Paul we have an incredible example, the ultimate example. We think of Paul, of course, as the great awakened missionary who transformed the world almost single-handedly. One who had never met Christ in the flesh and yet turned everything around. But before he was that, what was he? Most of us know that he was the wonder boy of Judaism, the student of the great Gamaliel, the pride of his Judaic heritage. He stood zealously for tradition, for the way it was done, for all that the old religion stood for, which was external and pleasing to men and women. In other words, self-righteous. If you do this, you'll be approved. And every time he persecuted this new heretical sect, he was honored. So Paul started out, to bring it down to earth, as what you might call an SS officer, the Gestapo, a murderer, pulling people out of their houses, taking them to the other side of the village, and watching them be stoned to death. Now, I want you to vividly understand what that means, how vile and barbaric that is, to throw stones at someone until they are dead. For certain people they don't like, they are to use small stones so that it takes a long time. How's that for primitive horror? That's who Paul was. He personally was responsible for killing Stephen. All these people on fire with a new love, a new openness to God's Spirit. And every time he did that, he became more important. In other words, his religion and his loyalty to his religion made him a mass murderer. How's that for crazy? You know, if you get too stuck in tradition, in what is required rather than the spirit of it, it turns into its opposite. That's why history is such a bloody mess. That's why so many atheists point to what religion has done to humanity. That's why we cannot afford to do that. We must learn from Paul. Something happened. Let's see what there is to learn here. This transition from the one who was hunting down and killing good people in the name of religion says in verse 10, am I now trying to win the approval of men or of God? Am I trying to please men? Now listen to this. If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. This illness of trying to please people instead of God. We all have it. We all want everybody to be our friends. From childhood on. Nobody wants to have enemies. Nobody wants to be disliked and isolated. My friends, we have to wake up and realize in this world, there is no other way. If you're going to take the way of Christ, if you're going to be a servant of the Almighty, of goodness and kindness, you will be persecuted. So this illness that the old language says is man-pleasing is what made Paul such an awful human being. Killing other people, thinking he was serving his religion. Let that turn over in your mind. If we misuse religion, it becomes its opposite. If religion is intolerant, if it encourages us to not be kind and forgiving, then it is not the religion of Jesus Christ. And Paul, in his transformation, came to that understanding. He was no longer out to be the hero of a religion that rewarded such awful behavior. He let go of tradition and what he thought was the way of God. And he stresses that what happened to him is not of human origin. It wasn't reading the midrash, the commentaries, and all those great writings of the rabbis. It was an inner illumination, something from within that blew open all of this wrong thinking, all of this wrong behavior. And it is the same for each of us. We are called to an inner understanding that changes everything, slowly but surely. I can't do it for you. You know, I have preached thousands of sermons. And I ask you, wouldn't you get discouraged if at the 8,892nd sermon, it seemed like nothing happens? No matter what is said, no matter how inspired, no matter if Spirit itself speaks. Because each one of you has to do something, has to get it, has to realize what it is in you that has to change. The old has passed away, the new has come. That is the whole heartbeat of the Christ event. All of us are like Paul, to go from one way of being to another way of being. I like to quote this non-biblical statement. Let me get it right. Because it's such good common sense that everybody can understand. If you aim at nothing, you will hit it every time. We have to have goals. Not like the self-improvement stuff. Goals from here. And those goals tell us that we are meant to please God by living according to the teachings of Christ. So when you catch yourself gossiping, being mean-spirited, backstabbing, whatever it is, at least have the honesty to know what it is. Because God is there watching, and watching the choices we are making. There will be eternal condemnation for those who follow me and try to destroy what I have done. Because once Paul was transformed, every time he started a beautiful community among the foreigners, the Gentiles, here would come folks from Jerusalem to undo what he had done. Even though he was filled with that Spirit of Christ, it was just too much of a new song. It was universal. He knew it was for everybody. The Jewish Christians thought it was just for the Jews. Now, to put it graphically, what that means is, okay, and I've told you this before, but it's what it is. The Jews thought you had to continue the laws literally if you were to become a Christian. That means if you're 58 years old, you have to get circumcised. I assure you that's a very different experience than when you're 8 days old. Need I say more? That would get in your way, wouldn't it? I think I'll go find another religion. But they insisted that you had to become like them instead of recognizing the new song that was in the air, the new way of being, that was freedom, that was intimacy with Abba. And Paul's extraordinary success was not just his astonishing transformation and perseverance, it's that he brought agape love into the world. And those Romans and Greeks and others began to recognize what a glorious way of being human that was. Does it ever make you feel good when you go that extra mile for another person? When you do something completely selfless with no reward? Surely everybody here has had that moment. If not, what are you waiting for? That's what it means to be Christian. That's what our Lord did. That's what is following Christ. Now, I'll remind you the French, suis-moi, follow me. Suis-moi also means be me. Be me. Christ did not come to be a little statue you worship or put on your dashboard. Christ came to be a template for each one of us, to show us the way of life that we were born to live. And even Paul says, after having stepped away from the horror of what he had done, he realized that from the beginning, in spite of all his mistakes, before he was born, he was called, he was chosen. I say to you in the name of our Lord that each one of you is called and chosen. That's why you exist. You're another chance for God to be incarnated through you and to bring something to this world. And don't you think our world in 2013 really needs a few good people? And as the stress hits the fan, as the global economy falls apart, people are going to be needing strong, steady, faithful people who depend not on anything but the Holy One to learn that song and to make it through. So this teaching is for each of us to become that which we were not, and yet that which we were born to be.